Hi, everyone. We are back with our last session where we're going to be talking about sexual health and young people. And I am so excited to be joined again by one of our board members, Kevin Shaw. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you, Elise, and great to see you again and talk about fun, interesting things that are important and they're fun because they're interesting, but it's really great to have these conversations.
Yeah, no, I've been really enjoying doing this. I feel like it's sort of taking a lot of what we're doing every day on So answering questions and kind of like looking at it from sort of the 30,000 foot level. So that it's been really fun to have these conversations. So today, what we wanted to focus on, So is really generally focused on sexual health. And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of conversation that I would like to have about the kind of intersection between sexual health, identity, relationships, and how those things are really intertwined with
Mhm.
mental health. There's actually some research that's come out in the past year or so showing that young people who have more and better sexual health education, more comprehensive sex ed, have better mental health outcomes. And I wasn't surprised to see that at all, because I think there are so many pieces of relate all the kind of aspects of relationships, friendships, and romantic relationships, as well as identity formation, as well as sexual health, that are so directly impacting young people's mental health. But one of the things I think that we really wanted to talk about, because we see this on So a lot, is loneliness. And there are these surveys that show that I think people probably have seen this also. I feel like it's in the news, right? The sort of epidemic of loneliness. And these surveys show that 40% of 16 to 24-year-olds, which is So's target audience, report feeling lonely often. So
Yeah,
let's talk about
yeah,
loneliness and sort of why do you think that is? What are your thoughts about that?
yeah. I think this is definitely exacerbated by the pandemic, and I feel like because of less social interactions for at least the generations that experience that as youth instead of as adults.
Yeah.
Because I think I experienced loneliness, and I know a lot of other people probably did. It's not something that is uniquely a few people. I think it's more rare that there's people who didn't feel as lonely growing up, and especially in the teenage years, but it's sexual development, brain development, all of those things. I think we when we are in that space, we feel it's easy to sit in the negative spiral. It is because I've sat in that, and loneliness is very much like a trigger for that. At least it has been for me, especially when we look at other people, when we look at our peers, we look at social media, celebrities, other friends, and they're with friends or they're dating someone, and I'm not, or why am I not invited to that party, or why am I not invited in those spaces? And I think that definitely helps promote that, and then we end up looking at ourselves because at that age, when with younger folks, that's when the development of sense of self starts coming through. We're like, oh, we're developing who we are. And then if we live in a system where individualism, where it is a system designed around narcissism in a way, that because narcissism rises to the top. So the traits of that are individualism. The traits of that are center of the world is me. And especially as a teenager, I also thought the center of the world was me. I get it. It's easy to do that as we're developing our brains. And so I think it when we don't feel like we're getting that sense of social community and social interactions, it becomes this space that loneliness can take over us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're touching on some really like sort of critical pieces about why this. I mean, I think you're right. Like, I think there are people who feel lonely their whole lives, right? And who struggle with feeling lonely and connection and comparisons and all of those pieces. But I feel like adolescence is like this kind of peak time for that. And I think it's so interesting because you have like adolescent brain development, right? They are sort of for the first time really kind of orienting away from family
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
towards friends, right? And kind of the outside world. And I think when you're younger, you have, you know, you're social and you have friends, but you aren't doing that comparison thing that you were talking about in the same way, because you're sort of, your world is much smaller. And
Hmm.
so all of a sudden, like your world gets bigger. You're sort of wired for social
Hmm.
connection. You want that social connection like so badly, but you also have no idea really how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think we get so many questions on Okay So where people are really trying to figure out how to navigate basic like sort of friendship and relationship things. Like the other day we got a question from someone who like was trying to make plans with a friend who kind of left them hanging, and
Mm.
they were literally like, I don't know what to do. And I was like,
Hmm.
well, can you say to your friend, hey, that sucked when you left me
Hmm.
hanging? And that
Hmm.
the young person was sort of like, oh, okay. You know, and it was just this sort of moment of like, did you know you can tell someone how you're feeling? And so it was this, it's so interesting to think about kind of young people really trying to navigate in this space of
Yeah.
like wanting something so badly, but not having the tools to like accomplish what they're wanting. And then I think the other thing that you mentioned is this idea that sort of you're the only one who is going through something like this, or sort of that real kind of self-involvement that is, I think, so characteristic of adolescence. And you know, I always I always think about this story that we had. So during the like kind of peak days of COVID during lockdown, we got a question from a young person who was essentially saying like, what is wrong with me? Like
Mm.
something's wrong with me. I'm not doing well right now, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
feeling really isolated and lonely and everything is feeling hard. What is my problem? And
Hmm.
it was just this like real moment of clarity for me, because here we were in the midst
Hmm.
of this like literal global
Hmm.
experience where I think almost everyone was feeling that way. And yet here was a young person who felt like they were the only one
Mm.
that was experiencing this. And so it was just this like light bulb sort of moment for me where, if I think back to when I was that age, it's like, yeah, you really do feel, because you haven't met enough people or had enough experiences yet, I think, to sort of understand that other people actually are not like, we're
Yeah.
all a lot more alike than we are different. And probably however you're feeling, there's like a bajillion other people feeling the
Oh
same
yeah.
way.
And
So yeah.
honestly, I don't even think it's just humans, because I think we're a lot alike, like all the other plants as
Yes,
well.
yes, yes.
And I think it's so interesting, this perspective of um the tools you talked about, not having the tools to share. So they're asking, what's wrong with me? Because they're struggling to even have the tools to be able to understand their feelings.
Yeah.
Brene Brown says language is a portal, right? And so if they had the words to just say, I am feeling such and such, and then have the safe space to share with people that they feel safe sharing with. And that's also so important. And that Okay So does is provide that safe space to at least ask those questions,
Mhm.
which a lot of people may not like, don't know. Like if you're an awesome parent that's great, like the kids can come and say anything to, that's amazing. But there's not like I couldn't do that. I still can. Like September I went and told my mom that I'm still afraid of her, and I'm 37, right? Like it's quite a um process for a lot of people. And I think the tools, and at that age, especially teenager, we've seen a lot of the stereotype of parents clashing with their kids. And instead, in that moment when they need friendship, they don't need, I think they don't need someone to be their warden.
Mhm.
They need someone to be their support, because they don't know what's going on. Their whole brain and everybody, everything's going crazy. And
Yeah.
then having a safe space to and get the tools they need is
Mhm.
I think it's very important. And you touched on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so often we sort of I think it's so easy to forget what it's like to be a teenager.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
so quickly as our brains sort of mature, we just kind of click into like adult mode, and it really is, I think, hard to remember
Hmm.
just what it was like and how little we knew. And so I really think about supporting young people as really a lot of the time being about skill development, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you make decisions? How do you, how do you think through what are good communication skills? What does it mean to be in a healthy relationship with anybody, right?
Hmm.
How do you identify your feelings? There are all of these like really crucial skills for being a happy, healthy adult. That I
Yeah.
think, to be fair, there are a lot of adults who
Oh
also
yeah.
who
And
haven't
that's
developed
what's
those
coming.
skills.
A lot of adults don't even have the tools themselves to share how they're feeling, or they
Yeah,
don't want to because vulnerability wasn't seen that way,
yeah,
or they, and so what ends up happening is they then the youth or the people feeling this way look at social media, look at other places to try to find role models, to try to see how they do that. And that just creates a cycle because now they see their peers in that. And like the story you've shared and the work that OkaySo has done with, and just being the virtual anonymous role model, so to
yeah,
speak,
yeah.
in that when people don't have that, when kids don't
Mhm.
have that in their own family or in their own life sometimes because they their parents aren't sharing their feelings.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true. And I think, the social media piece, I feel like we would be, so many of the conversations around loneliness, I think, are often blaming
Hmm.
social media, right? That it's sort of the fault of social media. We're more connected than ever yet. Why are we so
Hmm.
alone, kind of thing, right? And I feel like maybe sure to some degree, but I think that the bigger thing to me is that I think social media takes what's already happening, which is that comparison piece and feeling alone, and allows it to be kind of on an even bigger scale, right? Like I
Hmm.
said, your world gets bigger, like your world gets a lot bigger with social media. And I think the thing that we as experts, I think, are often saying to young people when we're talking to them about social media is reminding folks that when you're looking at social media, you're seeing someone else's highlight reel,
Hmm.
right? You're seeing the like very
And
carefully
it might not just be
curated.
highlight. Yeah, it might be put on.
Yeah, exactly. Like not even their highlight reel, but like a show, right?
Yeah,
Like
a
you're
show.
you're
Yeah.
seeing a show, and all of your own behind the scenes
Hmm.
drafts and all of right, all all the stuff. And so I think often what's happening is that young people are making that comparison, right? They're
Yeah.
comparing their behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel or someone else's
Yeah.
show and thinking that those are equivalent. And so even just helping young people understand that that's not a fair
Yeah.
comparison and that everyone has behind the scenes stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is just like even just that, again, that's almost like a skill, but that kind of piece of knowledge is so
Yeah.
helpful.
And I think what social media doesn't do well, it does a little bit, but doesn't do well, is help people feel seen or heard.
Mm,
It's become a popularity thing, or if I'm just observing without participating, it and I might see like, oh, that experience, maybe I can understand that. But then to process it, we need to have safe spaces and people we trust to talk with. And I think
yeah.
that's is missing as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Um, Before we wrap up, because we're somehow
Hmm.
that time just absolutely flew by. One of the things that I think about is that when we do surveys with young people, 80% of them say that, okay, so help them feel less alone.
Hmm.
And, just the power of having a place like that where you can put the things that you feel alone about and then feel less alone. I just think it's so amazing. Um, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that you want to say about loneliness and teenagers before we wrap up.
Yeah, I would just say like helping create spaces for people where they can feel safe sharing themselves and showing them role models of people doing that is great. And OkaySo is such a easy, safe space to access, accessible in that way, and it's a real person at the other end, not AI. And that is, I think, the magic behind why they don't feel alone.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Just that connection, right? That
Yeah.
authentic human connection is so beautiful that we all need it so much,
Hmm.
no matter how we're getting it. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us again. This has like made my day, given me like a boost of energy. And to anyone who is watching, check out the other videos in our series. You can find them in our newsletter or on our Instagram page or on our YouTube channel. And I hope that these helped you reflect on your own experiences as a young person, and maybe connect to young people today and what they are going through. So we hope you have a great rest of your day or evening whenever you are watching this. Bye, everyone.